Hey guys, today's project is this Technics SL-1600mk2. I've had this turntable for quite a number of years. If you saw my SL-1200mk2 video, you heard the story of how I got that one. It was to replace a front loader that I had, or I still have, the Iowa LX100, which I bought around 2000, 2001 when I got back into vinyl for a while. I got frustrated with that one because it was a little unreliable and I was always having to take it apart and futz with it. The speed wasn't stable and I had a few other problems. But it was actually a decent sounding turntable. But anyway, I picked up the 1200 as a replacement for that because it was, I just wanted something that was reliable, that would just work. The 1200, you know, has this great reputation, well deserved. I love my 1200, but I quickly realized that there's one feature that I was missing. I knew it was fully manual when I got it, but I just hadn't really come to terms with the fact that it doesn't shut itself off. And I knew it didn't shut itself off, but I didn't realize how much I would miss that feature when I got it. So after a while, having it for a while and like forgetting it, you know, leaving it running, sitting there on the center groove for God knows how long, at times I was like, okay, what are my other options? So I started doing a little more research, and Technics had several different versions of the Mark II in various levels of automation and sort of styling. The 1200 was very DJ oriented. There were other models that were also manual. They have a semi-automatic version, and the 1600 was always their fully automatic. And I have an SL-1600, the original 1600. That is also a direct drive turntable, but it doesn't have quartz lock and a few other things. But so anyway, I found this guy on Craigslist one day. It looked like it was in good shape, and so I was like, okay, why not? I'll pick it up. And so here I am getting a fully automatic turntable again. Not quite as crazy as the front loader, but still pretty automated, and it sort of worked when I first got it, but it was always really sluggish. One thing that these turntables have a reputation for is the Tonearm Motor. So unlike the 1600, the non-Mark II, and countless other turntables, the Tonearm sort of automated mechanism is driven by the platter itself. There's usually a gear in the center, and then a larger gear and some arms and levers and all kinds of crazy mechanisms to actually lift and drag the Tonearm back and forth and drop it down and all that stuff. This one is more advanced. It actually has a separate motor that drives the Tonearm automation separate from the platter. So it does not, the speed that the Tonearm moves and its responsiveness does not depend on the speed of the turntable. So one thing, like if you ever use one of those types of turntables, you'll notice it's usually like a mechanical switch that you flip to start and stop it, and there's always a delay because usually, since it's driven by the platter, there's usually a peg that spins around, and you got to wait when you click the lever. There's usually something that comes around and catches that, so you got to wait for it to come around. With a separate motor, it's, you know, it responds immediately to your commands and whatnot. But anyway, to make a long story short, these have a reputation for getting sluggish, and usually it's a very simple fix, and so I went ahead and did that fix not too long after I got it. Basically, there's a motor. That motor that I was speaking of is under the platter here, so let's just take that apart. Here's your platter. This one's damped, which is nice, unlike the non-Mark II 1200. You'll see these windows that are in the platter. That's a little unusual compared to the other models. That's for this sensor up here. Actually, these are the sensors, and this post has an infrared light. And what happens is, as the record spins, when this window lines up with one of these sensors, the record will cover up one or more of these, and that tells the automatic mechanism how big the record is. So it can do a 12, 10, or 8 inch optically, and obviously the problem there is when you have a transparent vinyl, it doesn't work. In fact, it refuses to do anything because it thinks there's no record on the platter at all. So this is the sort of guard that's protecting the mechanism underneath. So let's take that off. So I've put this I brought this turntable out of storage. I hadn't used it in like almost 4 years, and I was using it in my office because I recently put a turntable in my office and wanted to be able to listen to records there since I work from home now and spend a lot of time up there. But I quickly realized that it was acting up again, so I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. So there's all the electronics. We take the shield off. So this is the power transformer. Here's your the stator for the direct drive motor. And there's a couple sensors in there for that. And right here is the other motor I was talking about. And you can see down there there's a belt that drives this pulley. This is the belt that I replaced. So usually if you get one of these and it's acting sluggish, first thing to do is just replace this belt. And as you can see, it's really easy to get at it. You just take this stuff off and you can just get right at it and pop it off. But I already replaced this belt. And when I replaced it, it did help. But it would still get stuck. What usually happens is it starts up fine, but when the record's over and it's trying to bring it over, it stops right about here. And then just kind of, sometimes it'll really slowly eventually work its way over. Other times it'll just hang out there forever. And I can see, I tried it with this cover off, and this motor is spinning. It's trying to move it over, and the pulley is turning, so it's not like it's the belt slipping. So the other thing that can happen with these is the sort of the clutch that's pulling the arm. The friction of that clutch is fighting against some friction that's caused by some grease that's in this mechanism, and so basically you have to go in there, clean up all the old grease, replace it with new grease. The classic old electronics issue, electromechanical issue. It ends up being the grease that lets you down. In addition to doing this fix, there's one other thing I want to do, and that is to disable the muting feature. So there is, when the Tonearm is in motion, there's a relay that clicks that shorts the cartridge output to ground, or shorts them together, shorts the coils together. And that's just to mute things when it's moving so you don't hear it dropping the needle on over your speakers. And that's fine for the most part, but the issue is that the particular preamp that I use, the Shit Manny, it does not like that. Both turntables that I have a dual that also has a muting circuit, and I had to disable that one as well. It appears that preamp puts a small DC offset on the cartridge when it loads the cartridge, and when you short that to ground, it trips some sort of protection circuit in the preamp, and so the preamp makes a pop, and it makes this like 60 hertz buzzing noise for a while, and it stays in protection for like 5 to 10 seconds, and then finally it clicks off. There's another loud pop, and then it's back. It's really irritating, and especially when you're starting a record, it sets the needle down, unmutes, and it takes 5 to 10 seconds for the preamp to finally recover and start actually doing its job, so you miss the beginning of the record, and it's just irritating. So that's the only preamp I know of that has that problem, but it's the preamp that I use and the preamp that I like. So the muting circuit's sort of just a frivolous thing that I don't really need. I'm going to disable it in a way that I can easily reverse. So that's the plan. So first let's lock the Tonearm and get the cartridge off, or the head shell. Set that aside. So I've never had this thing this far apart before. It looks like, take these screws off and this hopefully frame comes off. Let's take the cover off. Get that out of the way. Start with these screws here. I imagine there's got to be more than just those 4 screws, so let's see here. Let's take a look at the suspension. Usually you gotta take the feet off. I know on the 1600 you gotta take the feet off. Not sure where that came from. Alright, so it looks like this circuit board's attached to this, and that circuit board's attached to that. This is the motor, and then the plinth sort of floats over that. So, let's see what we got to disconnect here. That guy. That guy. That out of the way. Alright, so I figured out. It's this screw and another one on the other side to release the suspension from the back here. So now they should come apart. There we go. Alright. So let's set it back down. Let's see if we can get her off. That's better. Alright, so now what we got? We got this guy. Got the nope. There's two blue wires that unfortunately wire wrapped. One soldered on that end and wire wrapped on that end. That's unfortunate. Alright, well, moving on. I've decided I'm going to cut these and put a connector here. There we go. Alright, so we finally got the top of the plinth off. That was a bit of a learning experience. So next we need to direct our attention here, because this is where the trouble is. So let's take this Tonearm assembly off. See if we can figure this out. There we go. Alright, there it is. All of its glory. So if you look in here, this black plastic piece here, that's connected to the Tonearm. It's like a big cam, see? And what you see here, this rubber piece here, I believe this is a brake of some sort. And this moves in and out. And there's also a roller down in there. You can see it right there. And that's what's engaging with this cam and actually moves the arm. And there just isn't a whole lot of friction. I have it engaged right now. I don't know if the brake is dragging when it shouldn't or what. So we're going to need to go deeper. That's interesting. So here's the muting circuit. Well, it's not really a circuit, it's just a switch. This guy right here. So these little yellow coaxes here come up to the Tonearm wiring, and that's what shorts them out. So all I gotta do is desolder probably right here, and that'll disable that. That's easy. Alright, so using an old toothbrush and some denatured alcohol and some paper towels and cotton swabs, I've removed all the old grease from the gears here and this little cam wheel here. Again, I don't think the grease had anything to do with it. I'm just doing my usual re-lubrication thing with some synthetic grease anyway, but I'm pretty sure the issue is not too much friction due to grease, but insufficient friction due to this roller right here not getting enough friction on the cam. There was a light amount of oil that I detected on the cam here. I think it was maybe a silicone oil. So I've cleaned all that off. There's not a whole lot of friction on this thing, but I'm just going to put it back together and hope that returning it back to its proper state is enough to fix it. It doesn't seem to need anything else. So let's go ahead and relube this gear here. This is the stuff I like to use. It's synthetic, so it won't dry up. And I don't think it needs a whole lot of grease. It's more just to sort of quiet the motor, I think, to promote smoother operation. There isn't a whole lot of friction here, anyway. Let's see how we did. Fortunately, we got to get it back together before we can test it. This kind of sucks. Alright, so this brass pin needs to go in that hole, apparently. Alright, so as you can see, I've taken it apart again. Yeah, I still wasn't happy with the amount of friction that the roller had up against the Tonearm. This is the roller here. I've taken it apart a different way this time. So this guy here is what spins and moves this guy. This guy is moved by this arm. So this guy pivots on the same shaft as the other guy, and this arm is what makes it swing back and forth. And this arm is moved by this pin. So what happens is this guy spins, the pin bottoms out, and the clutch starts to slip. And it's the friction provided by this clutch that's a lot of force now that I'm feeling it. But the thing is, it doesn't have much mechanical advantage. So it pivots here, and I think on the return journey it's on this side, so it's pushing on this arm, and the arm at this end where it's actually pushing the roller, it doesn't have much mechanical advantage. So there's a lot of friction, but I don't know if it's enough. So there's a really stiff spring in there. I think this is all pressed together. I don't think it's possible to take it apart. I mean, there is a hex head there. There's a bunch of what I would call tool marks on there. I feel like somebody's been in here before. It wasn't me. Okay, so this nut is turning. So either I'm about to commit a huge mistake, or maybe we can adjust this guy. Oh no, it's just spinning the bottom there. The worst case scenario, of course, is I lose control of it and the spring goes flying across the room and I never see it again. That's usually how these things work out. But I am a glutton for punishment, so here we go. Yeah, it's coming off, which implies that it's adjustable. Scared you, didn't I? I'm going to go do this in a vise. Alright, so the good news is it comes apart at zero tension, so it won't come flying apart on you. So let's see what we got. So it's two metal plates, and the friction surface is this little thin piece of nylon, I'm guessing. It looks pretty dry, so I don't think that's the problem. I was wondering if some of that whatever mystery lubricant I saw got in here, but I don't think that's the case. So let's put this back together. Yeah, you can see there was some red Loctite on there. I need to degrease my fingers, and we'll degrease this whole thing. I'm just using some denatured alcohol here to make sure there's no oil on any of these parts. It does look like there might have been something on there. Gotta remember there's grease on that gear, so gotta be kind of careful. Oh, there's a second surface here. It's another nylon ring, but this spins freely. I think, yeah, because this nut spins freely. The friction. The important friction is between these two. But I will clean them off anyway. All right. That's a very slippery surface, honestly. We can crank down this spring a little bit more than it was and see if that does the trick. Found my red thread locker. Put a small amount on the threads there. So it kind of makes me wonder if this thing just backed off. That might be why it wasn't providing enough friction. Hard to say. I'll crank this down before it cures on me. Alright, I got it cranked down pretty good. It's different than it was. Hopefully this thing can overcome the friction. I guess I should try it. So it's kind of a balancing act between yeah, it seems like it's alright. Sure we don't have any thread locker down in the shaft here. That would not be good. Alright. That might have done the trick. We cleaned this off. It may have had some oil on it, maybe not. We tightened this nut. That more likely is the culprit. The spring isn't totally collapsed, but it's pretty darn collapsed. It's pretty hard to move this now, but this worm gear can move it without too much difficulty, so I think we're okay. Alright, let's clean this off one more time. Touching it with my fingers. We'll lubricate these guys a little bit, very, very little bit. It's better. Alright, that goes on there like so. And this guy goes in there underneath and grabs another guy. Get this guy out of the way. There we go. Alright. Went well on that. It's a lock washer, nut. All right. Well, there we go. Hey, see, it's going back home now. Seems to do the trick. All right, that was it. Just to review for posterity, so the most common failure of these mechanisms as far as not moving properly is the belt that goes from the pulley to the motor here. I replaced that belt about, it's probably been about 10 years now, but the belt still seems to have plenty of friction, but we'll see now. It may be, the story may have changed. Another thing that I read online is that the grease on this arm that pivots right here can get stiff. That's what moves this gear up and down. So when the tone arm is moving, this gear here has a pin, and either that way or that way, it lifts an arm that pushes up on this gear. And it's the friction between this gear and the pin, there's a clutch underneath here, that's what provides the force that pushes the roller up against the cam that moves this tone arm back and forth. So in my case, it looks like this nut right here on the clutch may have backed off a bit. Possibly. I took it apart, took the clutch completely apart. There was some red Loctite there that I did feel like I had to defeat to get it off, but it's hard to tell. It did move. It didn't crack the way, I don't know. It didn't quite feel like a Loctite joint to me. Took it apart anyway. I cleaned it all off with alcohol just in case there were any oils in there that weren't supposed to be in there. Put it back together, put some red Loctite on the threads, this stuff here, and tightened it down pretty much as far as I could. Not quite compressing the spring completely, but pretty darn close. And it does have more friction now. Put it back together, tested it out, and it's pulling the tone arm up like it should. The other possibility is the roller, the rubber roller on the other end of this shaft that actually engages with the cam that moves the tone arm. It's this gray sort of synthetic rubber, and it may simply just not have enough friction now. I don't know. Though in my research I never found anyone claiming that they had to replace that roller. And it's not a nitrile rubber roller, it's not a black rubber roller, so I just don't think that's it. So anyway, that's that. Let's put this together. So the other thing we did too is disable the muting circuit by unsoldering these leads right here. So yeah, let's put this guy back together and see what happens. Alright, let's get the tone arm back on the plinth here. I forgot to mention this little washer knee clip. I didn't have that on. I just put that on. I found it in my little parts tray. Never want to have extra parts. Another thing to check too is the Tonearm wires. Coming from the pivot here, they're delicate little guys. Make sure they're in their little spot. There's just a little spot in the circuit board that kind of hangs on to them. They're just loosely held because they need to freely move when the Tonearm moves. So just make sure that when the Tonearm pivots, they're not binding up on anything. Looks good. Alright. Wipe off some extra grease here. I don't have the belt on yet. We'll put that on after it's down. Make sure it's fully degreased. So this guy just sits right in here. Just make sure your cables are routed through here, not caught underneath anywhere. And that's that. So we got these 3 black screws that hold the mount to the plinth. Last little screw is the sheet metal screw. A little tricky to get in there. This just holds the motor bracket down. Alright. Let's get the belt on there. Degrease my fingers. I do have another new belt for this, but I'm going to put the old new one on for now. See how it does. Alright, let's get the top of the plinth back on. Similar to the non-Mark II, we need to get the Tonearm centered, get the lever out of the way. Got this harness. We don't want to cover that up. So there's this little, trying to get it in the camera here, this little tab right there. You need to kind of swing that around the back of the Tonearm base there. And we just need to set it down, get it into the suspension. Make sure there's no cords caught like this power cord is right now. There we go. Alright, that sort of feels like it's trying to get somewhere. Yeah, it feels pretty good. So we have these blue screws with the felt washers that were all up in here. There's one without a felt washer. I'm guessing it's this one here, unless I lost it. Alright, we need to repair this. These wires that I cut, these were part of the power supply. This is the AC volts coming from the transformer to the rectifier here. They're wire wrapped to the board. There was no connector, so I just cut them. I'm going to put a connector on them right now. I'm going to go with the mini Molex. Alright. I don't own the crimp tool for these Molex connectors, so I just I crimp them on with needle pliers, and then I always just solder the wire to the connector. And then once it's cooled, I just crimp the strain relief onto the insulation. Alright, voila, connected. Speaking of connectors, let's hook everything else up here. Tonearm control. This is motor control. This This is a switch. I think that's everything. Yep, now we got this guy here. Alright. Theoretically, this should work. So let's put the platter on before we put the shield back on and see what we get. Much better. Well, I think that did the trick. Alright, just need to button up the bottom here. So we got our strain relief for the audio cable. Make sure when you're putting the top on that you tuck this guy in there, because you can't really push it in afterwards. These two longer screws go in these little posts here. And the feet with the short screw go in the back. And the feet with the longer screws go in the front. And although these look like adjustable feet, like the 1200 Mark II, they're not. They're just sort of a decorative ring around a rubber foot. Which is unfortunate. Alright, bottom is all put back together. Let's finish the top. Yeah, so for those blue screws, I can see now the ones with the felt go here because this thing sort of sits on them, whereas this one, there's nothing sitting on them. While I have it opened, put a little of the motor oil in there. Alright, so this should wrap it up for this Technics SL-1600 mk2 servicing and a little modification. Went pretty well. I'm happy this turntable seems to be working back the way it's supposed to, and I'm looking forward to using it on a daily basis. So thanks for watching.